What's up everyone and welcome back to HateWatchers. Today we're continuing on with our coverage of the Rings of Power with episode 4, Eldest. Let's jump right into the breakdown. Spoilers ahead. We begin in the Grey Havens where Elrond is telling Galadriel he needs an archer and 2 swordsmen, to which Galadriel obviously responds that she can be all 3. The Elvish cross-country team sets out to jog across Middle-earth only to be met by a destroyed bridge. After getting engaged last episode to herself, Galadriel fears that this delay will cause her to miss her wedding. To herself. Elrond decides that they'll travel a different route, and in the meantime, he asks Galadriel if she's named her ring, and she replies with Nenya. And he says Nenya what? And she says Nenya business, bitch. Off somewhere in Rune, the stranger is looking for Nori and Poopy, but he only finds this goat. He follows it to someone's hovel where this guy thanks the stranger for bringing home his wife. Then the homeless man gets distracted by some floating garbage and wanders off, only to get swallowed up by a tree. Somewhere nearby, Nori wakes up to find Poopy doing Blackfoot, which is weird, but at least it's not blackface. Anyway, things get interesting when they leap to their deaths. But unfortunately they both survive, and are found by an Indian, dressed like an Indian, Feather. Poopy is instantly attracted to his stench, and the Harfoots blackmail him into letting them into his village. So Nori, Poopy, and Vivek arrive at this impossibly diverse village, where they meet the Queen of the Stores, who's just as full of sass as she is jelly. Nori says something that I can't repeat here, and they get taken captive, even though she repeatedly says, "It's cool, my mom's black, I can say it." Back with the hermit, he cheats on his goat wife with a tree, pulling out the stranger before introducing himself as Tom Bombadil. We then cut to the stranger taking a bath when Tom enters without consent and asks the stranger if he wants to play Drop the Soap. Later on, the stranger asks who Tom is, and he replies with Eldest, casually mentioning he's been around since the dawn of time. And all he's learned in that time is how to do a few cheap parlor tricks, but then they're interrupted by the Dark Wizard's forces outside. Then they discuss this Dark Wizard and realize that him joining forces with Sauron would mean the end of Middle-earth. Tom implies it's the stranger's duty to save the world, but the stranger says, "Come on, man, I don't even have underwear." Back with the pointy ears, the elves are desecrating the burial sites of dead human kings in a spooky forest because elves are assholes, and they come across the message that never reached Celebrimbor. But then some unseen foe puts the black elf in chains. Real subtle, Amazon. Some barrow wights emerge from their tombs, and we get this elf Venger's pose and camera sweep. They fight, but quickly find that their weapons are useless. Galadriel is about to get dragged away until Elrond emerges from a tomb with the White's own weapons that do work on them. How convenient. They then dispatch the rest of the Barrow Wights, and before their dying screams have even subsided, Elrond has already launched into some pure exposition, explaining how these weapons are totally consistent with the lore, and this wasn't just a convenient plot contrivance. Then the elves want to go try and save the Black Elf, but Galadriel says no, and doesn't elaborate. Near Pelargir, Isildur, Arondir, and the unwashed masses search for Theo, but only find some dismembered body parts, so everyone decides to go out later in search of the wild men they think did this. In the meantime, Estrid is cranking Isildur's shaft, and he recoils when he unexpectedly gets squirted in the face. The two flirt for a bit until Arondir awkwardly asks if he can join. When Estrid rejects his request, he confronts her about the gang tattoo he saw her covering up the other night. She says "You're trippin', fool," and throws a vase at him that he Chuck Norris's out of existence, before grabbing her and showing Isildur her true gang colors. The three set out in search of Theo, who wakes up trapped atop a tree, and the first thing he experiences upon waking up is this guy calling him fat. Cutting back, Isildur gets stuck in a muddy mire called Lizzo's Mess. He gets swallowed entirely and pulls Arondir down with him for good measure, and Estrid just leaves. To get help, that is, she pulls up one of Lizzo's nameless things, and Arondir frees them from the beast. Back with the Stores, the Queen shares her cave finger painting that she calls art with Nori, who just thinks it's really, really bad, but the delusional Queen attributes a different meaning to her tears. However, the moment is interrupted by the Dark Wizard's minions, who are here to deliver their weekly bitch slap to the Queen. Meanwhile, the elves compromise and hold 3/5 of a funeral for the Black Elf that died. Galadriel and Elrond skip the funeral to talk about planning her wedding to herself. The ring gives her a few visions of her wedding, and Galadriel just cannot wait. Elsewhere, Arondir gives Estrid the key to Isildur's heart. He grabs it and is like, yeah, I'm ready to be hurt again, and gives it to her. And he didn't think the hurt would come this quickly. They talk her down, but a nearby tree ent appears and thwacks her off. Arondir stops the ent wife's attacks, but it throws a tantrum when Arondir says neatly trimmed trees aren't his thing. He's more of a bush guy. After a male tree ent, as determined by the tree's nuts, awakens, the female one is still lashing out, but Arondir calms her down by feeling her up. The ents are calm now and release Theo, and Isildur is about to suck Estrid's face, but then her fiancé Todd shows up. Arondir tells Theo he's going off to follow the orcs and confront Adar, and Theo looks around and says he's going to stay. There are more chicks here, it's just math. Meanwhile, the elf Vengers come across the orc army on the march, and one of the orcs shoots an elf with an arrow after missing the horse he was aiming for. The rest of the elves make this wounded elf die in silence, but when Galadriel gets distracted by her massive rock and starts thinking about her wedding, the wound miraculously heals and no one can believe it. Then Galadriel pulls a shocking move by proposing to Elrond, forcing him to say yes, and then heading off to face the orcs herself. She uses throwing knives and flaming arrows and does more weird horse fighting moves and invents napalm, while the elves are still in disbelief that she and Elrond are engaged. But he tells them it's just a ruse. Galadriel is too obsessed with herself to marry anyone else, and this was just a move to try and make it to her wedding on time. She might be a little bit late though, as she's pulled from her horse and Adar extinguishes her spark of brilliance as the episode comes to an end. But we're not done yet, as the Rings of Power copies the Acolyte and puts some modern music in its end credits.
Now let the song begin, let us sing together.
Not only is this totally out of place in a medieval fantasy epic, but they put this stupid lighthearted song right after this tense, dark moment. Just stop doing this. Well, we've reached that point in the video where we have to decide whether this episode was a great watch or a hate watch. And this one is definitely a hate watch. Episodes 1 through 3 weren't too good, but compared to this one, they look almost watchable. This episode was all over the map, introducing us to new characters and storylines while existing storylines stumbled forward a little bit. But rather than hone in on 2 or 3 storylines and really give them the time they need, this episode decided just to try and do them all, jumping from one disconnected storyline we don't care about to another. And the sad thing is that this episode didn't even hit all of the storylines going on in this show. There was no Durin, or Numenor, or Celebrimbor and Anatar, and that just makes it clear to me that this season is going to have much the same problem the first one did, with too many spread out characters and disconnected storylines. It kind of makes it hard to get invested in the season's overarching narrative when storylines are picked up and dropped on a whim. Now, while there was some action, it didn't really do much for me, and it ended with Galadriel the Karen Sue just doing it all herself. Galadriel spends half her time being a Karen to Elrond and the High King and just about everyone within earshot. And then she spends the other half of her time in combat being a one-woman army Mary Sue. So I'm calling her Karen Sue. Now I know she's an elf and the commander of the Northern armies, so she's not a Mary Sue, but the show has presented her that way, so the name's staying. This season, her Karen moments have come out of this rift between her and Elrond that the Ring has created. I can understand what they might have been going for, but the way this simmering division has been presented this season, and with how often it comes up, it just ends up feeling annoying and uncomfortable rather than interesting. Like, after the 5th scene of Galadriel saying the ring's good and Elrond being a dick about it, just move on, we get it. Anyway, Tom Bombadil seems like a charming character, even if he is a bit less jolly than he is in the books. But this character being palatable only presents more problems because if we like a character, then we don't want him anywhere near this show. Especially someone like Bombadil, who occupies a very special place in many Tolkien fans' hearts. And just like that, thanks to Amazon releasing the first 3 episodes all at once to game the streaming metrics and force the show to look like a hit right out of the gates, we're already halfway done with this 2nd season after this episode. It's probably a good thing because it means people are subjected to a bad, insulting show for a shorter period of time. But on the other hand, how things are going to go is pretty much set in stone at this point, so any hope of this season being significantly better than the first is quickly fading into the shadow. But what about you? Is the fact that Season 2 is halfway over a good thing in your book, or do you enjoy hate watching the show? What did you think about this episode? Let us know in the comments below. And make sure to like the video and subscribe to HateWatchers to stay up to date on the Rings of Power. Thank you for dropping the soap with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.